Start with a chant. Huh? Huh? Chicken. Om tadekam smaramasthadekam bhajamah tadekam jagat sakshi rupam namamah sadekam nidhanam niralam mamisham bhavam bodhiputam sharanyam vrajamah. Om shanti shanti shanti. On that alone do we meditate. That alone do we worship. To that alone, the witness of the universe, do we bow. To that one who is our sole eternal support, the self-existent Lord, the raft to safety across the ocean of this world, do we come for refuge. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening. Wonderful to be here. Thank you, Mataji, for my pranams to revered Mataji, who is very much senior to me. So I feel a little embarrassed to be speaking in front of her. But she has invited me to participate with all of you in a retreat this weekend on deepening our spiritual life. And it's a very appealing topic for me. So I was just thinking, what does it mean really to deepen our spiritual life? What do we mean when we say deepen our spiritual life? Why would we want to deepen it? Maybe that's a silly question for us who are seekers. Swami Vivekananda says, if there is a God, we must see him. If I have a soul, I must perceive it. That kind of feeling comes when just having a faith that, oh, God is there. For some people, that's enough. God is there. God is in my heart. And that's enough. And at the end of life, I'll think of God and I'll go to God. But for us, for seekers, we want more. That's not going to satisfy. We want more. We want to go deep. And no, how to go deep? We don't have time to meditate for 3 hours a day and study scriptures for another hour a day and all of that. We don't have time for that. How do we deepen our spiritual life? And so that's what I want to talk about this weekend. So let's set an intention for the time that we're going to be together tonight and tomorrow and Sunday, that retreat. This is one of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. We should go now and then and withdraw from the ordinary activities of our daily lives and spend that in spiritual thought, in thinking about the divine. So let's set the intention that we will try to deepen our spiritual life this weekend in this retreat. And I will do my best to share what the kind of things work for me to deepen my spiritual life. And I hope that we can come a little closer to that goal of ours, which is to know God, to see God, to know that without a doubt, unshakable conviction that, yes, the divine is within me, my own true self is divine. And Sri Ramakrishna actually provides a simple recipe for spiritual life, for deepening our spiritual life, a framework that turns our whole life into spiritual life. Swami Prabodhananda used to say, there's no vacations in spiritual life. It's 24/7, 24/7, 365 is spiritual life. And on leap years, 366. So there's no holiday. Spiritual life means all the time. So it's not just a matter of Sunday mornings for an hour. It's not just a matter of maybe 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. It's how do we turn the whole life into spiritual life? How do we deepen our life? So some of the salient elements of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings of how to spiritualize our lives are, first, prayer. Praying with yearning. And through that practice, developing a relationship with God. Developing a relationship. God is in Vedanta, God is a principle, the very principle of our being, the very ground of existence. But God is also a person, a father or a mother or a friend or a child whom we can approach, and we develop that relationship. And for many people, those who, particularly those who cultivate the path of devotion, which is most of us, that relationship is part of deepening our spiritual life. Then let me just mention a couple of other points. He also strongly recommends holy company, which is what we're doing today. We're spending our time with other seekers. And from time to time to go into solitude, to spend the time away from our regular duties and just be with ourselves. As Swami Prabhupada used to say, when you go for solitude, he just gave a very short, succinct instruction. Just you and God. Just 4 words. Just you. When you go to solitude, just you and God. And then we come to the kind of traditional practices that we think of as sadhana, spiritual practice. Sri Ramakrishna used to say his delightful way that he would say sadham bhajan, which means sadhana, spiritual practice, bhajana means worship. So it kind of rhymes, sadham bhajan. And what is sadham bhajan? What are those kind of practices? Puja, the worship, the japa, repeating the name of God, repeating the holy name, the mantra over and over again, dhyana, meditation, and singing the name and glories of God. He also recommended that a lot. And there are kind of little phrases in Bengali, they're kind of charming. Jap dhan. They'll say jap dhan. It always goes together somehow. Japa and dhyana, repeating the name and meditation. Or sometimes jap tap, which means repeating the name and intensely, because it's tapasya, it generates heat. It's a practice of going within and exerting some force on our minds, which creates heat. What's that force? Repeating the name again and again, and withdrawing our outgoing mind, turning it within. That's jap tap. So these are the kinds of practices he would suggest, but starting always with prayer. And finally, he would recommend that we always remember death. We keep death always in mind. And that from that naturally arises this practice of viveka, of discerning. Everything, I'm going to have to leave everything here behind. And when that realization, we understand that, but do we really understand it? Do we really know it in our heart of hearts? Yeah, but that's later, right? It's some future time. So this contemplation on death, remembering death. So this is the simple recipe of Sri Ramakrishna, and Swami Vivekananda, we can say, added to it this idea that we turn everything we do into worship. We offer everything we do, all the work we do, all the actions we have to do, we make them an offering unto the divine. So what is the essential ingredient in all of this, in all of these practices? What is the one essential ingredient? Longing. Longing is the essential ingredient, which ties all of these things together, to long for the divine. And so today I want to talk a little bit about that longing and about prayer. So for Sri Ramakrishna, longing is that one essential ingredient in spiritual life. If we don't have longing, nothing else will actually work, will help us. And if we do have it, it pulls everything into service in our spiritual life. And so he comes again and again back to this idea of longing, this he uses a term called vyakulata, extreme restlessness, impatience. I want God. I want it. I want it. And if we see in his own life, this was actually how he practiced his spiritual disciplines. When he started his in really intense seeking of the Divine Mother, it was, he hadn't had any training in meditation, nothing. He had a mantra and he had longing, tremendous longing, so intense that it drove him almost to suicide. And then he had that first overwhelming realization of Divine Mother. And he was not suicidal. Let's make that clear. And the suicide is not a helpful act in spiritual life. It sets us back, maybe at least it sets us back at least one lifetime, because it's this lifetime that we want to realize God. But that yearning. So let's turn to the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, one of my favorite books, which is of course recorded by Sri Ramakrishna's amazing disciple M. And during his second visit to Sri Ramakrishna, he asks him, under what conditions does one see God? Sri Ramakrishna has established for him, yes, the goal of life is to see God. How? He says, cry to the Lord with an intensely yearning heart, and you will certainly see him. People shed a whole jug of tears for spouse and children. It's really charming language. Can you imagine jugs of tears? You put a just jug under your eyes, and the tear collect this jug of tears. And yes, people weep. They do weep. But what do people? How many people actually weep for God? He lamented. People weep jugs of tears for money, for children, for spouse. They swim in tears for money, but weeps for God. Cry to him with a real cry. And he gives various examples to give us a hint of what is that kind of intense longing like? What is it? Can we liken it to any other kind of longing? And he gives some nice examples. First, he says, if we can love God, if we can yearn for God, combining the force of three different attractions, then certainly the vision of God is not far to seek. What are those attractions? The attraction of worldly possessions for a worldly person, like a miser for his or her wealth, and the child's attraction for its mother, a child who's missing his or her mother, panic, crying intensely, and the husband's attraction for the chaste wife, or because I was talking to a young man, we could take the wife's attraction for a chaste husband. So if we can combine the force of these three attractions and simply redirect them to the divine, then we attain the divine. So actually, it is always the divine which is attracting us. We don't realize it. We think that we are going to get perfect satisfaction when we get enough money in our bank account. And we think we're going to have satisfaction when when we get that promotion and finally get to be a manager in the company. But then we find that no, we're not satisfied being manager. We want to be vice president. And if by any rare chance we become a vice president, the presidentship looks pretty good, doesn't it? So it's in the divine that all our desires are satiated and we attain that fulfillment. So another example Sri Ramakrishna often used to give is of the disciple asking the guru, what is that? How do I yearn for God? What is that yearning like? And the guru says, yeah, come with me. So they go to the river and they go for their bath. And in Indian bathing, your head has to go completely under the water for the bath to be complete, like full bath. So you got to make sure that you're below the surface. So the disciple goes under, the guru reaches over and pushes his head down. And can you imagine? Oh, Gurudev is holding my head down. What's he doing? So he waits for a moment, but pretty soon he wants a breath of air. So he starts to come up. But the Guru is a strong man and pushes his head down. And gradually the disciple starts struggling, like, I need to breathe. And finally, when he's really struggling, Guru lets him come up. Well, how did you feel? I was dying. God, I was dying for a breath of air. When you long for God like that, that's the kind of longing that we need to find God, to realize God. That intensity that I'm going to die if I don't get a breath of air. So that gives us a little clue. So we might ask, why don't I feel that kind of yearn? Why don't I yearn for God like that? Keshav, Sri Ramakrishna had told the story many times, once to Keshav Sen and to other people. He likens us to a child with a toy, and we're happily playing with our toy. And he says, see, when the child is playing with its toy, the mother lets it play. And she's busy with her household duties. She's cooking, she's chopping vegetables, she's got the rice on the fire, and Indian kitchen, right, of those days. So fire. Now rice is on the gas, okay? Or I don't know, do we cook on gas here or with electric? Gas. We're cooking with gas in Dallas. Very good. So so she's and the child, but then the child has enough of the toy and starts to cry for its mother. And mom, probably knowing her, she'll grab another toy and try to distract the child. Maybe she'll pop a pacifier and pop the pacifier in the baby's mouth, and baby starts sucking on the pacifier. So mother goes back to her job, her work. Then the child really has had enough. He throws away the pacifier and screams at the top of his voice, "Mom!" What does mom do? She turns down the heat, or she takes the pot off the fire, and she comes running. She comes running, and she picks up the child, and she nurses it and holds it. So Sri Ramakrishna told Keshav, you do not see God because you busy yourself with such things as name and fame and scholarship. These are the toys that Keshav was busy with. So mother said, Keshav's happy with his toys of seeking name and fame and all of those things. So how can we attain that yearning? On the one hand, our teachers tell us, and it's a little bit sobering, it cannot be taught. Yearning cannot be taught. There's an interesting discussion with Swami Shivananda, one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, with a young man who wanted to learn how to meditate. And he guided him, pray with the greatest yearning and weep. Tears will wash away the dirt from the heart, and he will reveal his true nature there, out of his own grace. Then the disciple confesses, as we might also confess. But the trouble is that I do not have that yearning. How can this yearning for realizing him be increased? And then Mahapurush Maharaj says, as for yearning, my son, nobody can teach it to another. It comes of itself when the time is ripe. The more you feel the want of the Lord within you, the more intense will be the yearning in the heart. So it's starting to feel the want of the Lord. And when does it come? Sri Ramakrishna says, well, one does not feel restless for God until all one's worldly desires are satisfied. One does not remember the mother of the universe until one's share of the enjoyment of lust and gold is completed. So it's a little bit sobering. Is there any hope then for us? We just have to wait until it comes? No. That first of all, for all of us present here, the time is right. Because we're spending a nice Friday evening when we could be at home watching Netflix or going out for drinks or something, we've come to the Vedanta Society to spend time with a Swami and a Pravrajika and other seekers. So that means we have some yearning, or we wouldn't be here. We do have some yearning, and that is precious. So let's hold on to that thought. It is precious. And on the other hand, yearning cannot be taught, perhaps, but it can be caught to a certain extent. It can be caught. The spirituality cannot be taught, but it can be caught. And how do we catch it? From people who have it. That's why holy company is so important. It rubs off. Holy company rubs off. Sri Ramakrishna says, holy company begets yearning for God. It begets love of God. By constantly living in the company of holy people, the soul becomes restless for God. So that's beautiful. We have some yearning, and we're spending this weekend with other seekers of God. If we can get the company of a great saint, that is a real blessing. But in the absence of a great saint, we make do with what we have, which is other sincere seekers of God. We're spending that time together. Wow, it rubs off. And to recognize the importance and how precious that is, that longing that we do feel, it is precious. Like a little flame of yearning for God. We have to protect it. We put up, when you're building a campfire and it's a little windy, so if you get it started, then you have to put up some cardboard or something, protect that flame from blowing out. Once it's a burning fire, you can throw anything into it, but at the beginning, you have to protect it. So we protect that little yearning we have. That Sri Krishna, his beautiful teaching of the Gita, he says that among thousands of people, one here and there strives for perfection. One seeks to know me out of thousands. So if we ought to feel, because we have that spiritual interest. Swami Vivekananda, a little quote from Vivekananda. He suggests that the first step is, what do we want? What do we want? Let us ask ourselves this question every day. Do we want God? Then he says, I find many times I don't want God. I want bread more. I may go mad if I don't get a piece of bread. Many ladies will go mad if they don't get a diamond pin, but they do not have the same desire for God. They do not know the only reality in the universe. So we can apply a little bit of viveka, a little bit of discernment to our lives. When we find that we are getting a strong desire for some worldly thing, like the diamond pin or whatever it be, that new Tesla or whatever, apply a little of that viveka. Okay, is that really going to satisfy me? Or will coming a step closer to God satisfy me more? Remind ourselves that yes, by knowing my true self, by knowing the divine, by feeling the presence of the divine all around me, I will attain an incredible level of peace and joy. So one point I want to mention about longing is, you remember Swami Vipraananda, surely. He gave a talk. It was a Swami, he's long gone, but he gave a talk in Trabuco when I was there, called Longing and Belonging. And I don't remember much about the talk, but the title itself I remembered very much, because the thrust of his talk was that if we can feel that we belong to God, that God belongs to us, then we will yearn for God. Like the child who yearns for its mother. The child knows, my mother is my mother, belongs to me. So similarly, Sri Ramakrishna would say, is your divine mother a stepmother? No, she is your real mother. So if we can feel that sense of belonging to God, feel that sense that God is my mother or my father or my friend, that God belongs to me, then that longing comes. So that was I still remember that title all these 20 how many years later. So So this question of weeping, Sri Ramakrishna says, weep for God. Can we weep? It's very special. It's very powerful. It's also very difficult to bring that point of our longing to such a state that we actually weep. One important thing about that, we do it in private. If we do it in public, it becomes a show and it loses all its power. It's to be kept very, that's why Jesus also taught, no? Go into your closet and pray in secret, and you will receive the reward. But if you go out in public, then you make a show of it, then you get a reward. People that will talk about you as, oh, look how spiritual they are, and you'll feel, how spiritual I am, and that takes all the wind out of our sails. So let's see. This a couple of other things to know about longing, and we're going to be talking about these things again and again this weekend, because these are the practices that we do. Chanting the holy name, that beautiful line of Sri Chaitanya, chant the name of the Lord and his glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean. So in that idea, the mirror, the heart is envisioned as a mirror in which the divine is reflected. But can we see the divine reflected in it if the mirror is dirty, if it's dusty? So the idea of the name falling on our hearts and purifying it, like polishing a mirror. The chanting the name, chanting the mantra, it really is a revolutionary process. It revolutionizes our whole psyche. It rewires our brains, and it stokes the fire of our longing. So this is a practice. Another practice is singing the songs of the saints. Music is a wonderful way to open our heart and stoke that. And all spiritual traditions have powerful hymns and prayers and poems dedicated to expressing that intense longing of the poet saints who composed those songs. And Sri Ramakrishna used to sing many of those kinds of songs. Beautiful, beautiful songs. I'd like to just share about some ideas about longing for God that appeared in a tremendous article in October 1979. I'm sure you know it, the article of Swami Bhajanananda on aspiration. It's worth looking it up and reading it. He points out that, of course, as we've been talking, that this aspiration, this longing for God is the motive power in our spiritual life. It's essential. Without it, it's like a car without gas will not go. Well, nowadays, or if it's an electric car without any charge, it will not go. So it's the essential ingredient. And it unites the scattered powers of our mind, because we can think, sometimes I like to use the example of an Olympic athlete. You know, the Olympic athletes, if they fix their mind that I want to be in the Olympics, and maybe especially some of those great athletes who become gold medalists, and like Michael Phelps or anyhow, there's many of them. They get a bunch of them. And what is their life like? Single pointed focus. They are fixed on that goal. I'm going to get the gold medal. And every day in and day out, practice, intense practice. What is fueling that? That desire for the gold medal. And so that's a great lesson. If we can turn that kind of intensity in our spiritual lives, we make quick progress. In fact, the speed of our progress in spiritual life, how deeply we go, how quickly we can go deep, it all depends on this. How strong is our yearning? And he points out in his article, he warns us about some obstacles to longing for God. And he points out that just as holy company helps us, unholy company hurts us. So be careful. we get distracted. You know, we spend a few days with other spiritual seekers. That seems like the most important thing. If we spend a few days with diehard football fans, then why? Football seems like the most important thing. Or maybe Texas rodeo fans or something. But Texas also has football. Texas is football, isn't it? Football and rodeo. So then, you know, that's the most important thing. What's the next game? We're going to watch it. We're going to get together and watch it. We're going to have some beers and chips and hang out and watch the big game on Monday Night Football, you know. Whereas if we're spending time with seekers, oh, they're having a puja at the Vedanta Society on Monday afternoon, on Monday evening. Let's go. We'll go and have the puja. So it's the same kind of thing. And he mentioned something, another interesting thing. He calls it surrender to the collective. And he points out that in any group, whether it's a family or it's a school or it's a business or it's a monastery or it's even a Vedanta society, there is a kind of general collective level of excellence. And if someone shines, if someone rises above that, the tendency of the group is to pull that person down, pull that person back down to the sort of general level of not bad, but it's so if in any group of people, most people have a, like say even in a group of seekers, there will be a few people who have really intense longing, and most have middling kind of longing, which is good. It's still precious. But what tends to happen is that those with intense longing, they tend to get pulled down to the level, the general level. That's called surrender to the collective. So what happens, because people get preoccupied with the mundane and the trifling matters of daily life. And we can have arguments about the most silly things. And that's surrendering to the collective when we forget that that holding that intense yearning, when we get sidetracked. So that's the danger of the surrender to the collective. You know, the divine is always calling us. And how do we respond to that call? Do we say, okay, God, but wait, let the World Cup be over first, please. I got to watch that, or the Super Bowl. Or let me win this round of solitaire first, and then I'll go do my meditation. So, and one obstacle, a final obstacle, it was kind of interesting, is self-delusion. If someone believes, if we get the idea that we're illumined, and every now and then we meet someone like that, who says, oh yeah, I've realized God. And you look at such a person and you think, well, what are the signs of someone who has realized God? You feel a sanctity in their presence. They are so pure. They're so compassionate. And we're not seeing these signs in this person. We start to doubt. But they don't have to seek God because they believe they have already realized God. So this is a kind of a pitfall in spiritual life. It happens, alas, it happens to a few people. Compare that to great saints. When great saints attain illumination, what do? Do they just relax and say, I've realized now? No, they practice harder. They dive even deeper because there's no end to spiritual life. There's no end to spiritual realization. It's not like, you know, sometimes we think that enlightenment or God realization is like flipping a switch, the light switch, and either the switch is off or the switch is on. And I don't think that model is helpful. I think it's the dimmer switch is much more helpful, because the dimmer switch, you don't have dimmer switches here, do you? You can get them. That way you can just so then we'd have a good example to show to everybody how the switch, how the light, it starts out really dim, and most of us have them, right, in our homes and whatever. The light, you can set the brightness for what you want. So like that, it's not like illumination is on off. Yes, there may be some tremendous experience, but we grow gradually in purity. We grow in conviction. We start to intuit the presence of the divine within gradually, and gradually that unfolds and manifests. And where is the line between someone who's in ignorance and someone who's illumined? There may not be a clearly defined line. It's a gradual unfolding. So and it keeps going. So even a very advanced people who we would call good souls, we see they also practice, and they practice intensely. So that is, let's talk a little bit now about prayer, because prayer is a tremendous practice for stoking our yearning. And the interesting thing about Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, because Vedanta Society, we tend to emphasize meditation. And we often have meditation retreats, right? Meditation classes, Raja Yoga classes, and we talk a lot about meditation. We don't talk much about prayer. But we who read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna carefully know that he talks about meditation, but he talks more about prayer. One of his main instructions is pray to God. It's an interesting point. And there's something interesting about his language. When we use the word prayer, it reminds me of the Sanskrit word prarthana, which means to pray. And it almost suggests a kind of, okay, oh dear God, I want this, I want that, or some kind of formal thing. I recite certain words and I repeat them, and that's my prayer. But he doesn't use the word prarthana. Rarely he uses the word prarthana. He uses the word daka, which means to call. And there's a tremendous difference in these two words. It's not, he doesn't say pray to God, pray to God. He says call on God. Call. How to call? Call with a yearning heart. He uses the example of the child weeping for his father. Call and go on calling. So this is his basic instruction, call on God. And he also assures us that if we call on God with longing, the response is sure to come. They're a guaranteed response. God hears your prayer if it's sincere, if it's uttered from the depth of your heart. And what's more, if we take that kind of step towards God, intense prayer, God takes 10 steps towards us. So that's beautiful. God, he says, oh, God cannot but listen to prayer if it is sincere. You should practice calling on God every day. It is not possible to succeed in one day. Through daily prayer, you will come to long for God. There you have it, page 703, Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Through daily prayer, you will come to long for God. So the importance of prayer. And he also taught by example how to pray. He gave us many instances in the gospel where he starts praying, and we can learn a lot from that. What do we pray for? So, of course, we who are seekers, who are devotees, we will pray even when we're in trouble. When we're in trouble with the stock market crashes, we'll pray. But in this kind of prayer, this is the spiritual prayer. The seeker doesn't pray for wealth, for anything else, name and fame, for children, for a spouse, for anything, physical comfort. It's a prayer of seeking God alone. And for the kind of qualities in our life that will take us Godward, like devotion, purity of heart, detachment, wisdom, and maybe for overcoming obstacles like anger. Maybe I have an anger problem, maybe, then I can pray on that. Swami Swahananji also used to say, at least once a day, pray for spiritual things. We're seeker, we'll pray for everything naturally, but once a day at least pray for spiritual things. He also used to say, pray to Sri Ramakrishna, spiritual things. For everything else, there's mother. So we have our mother also, and we take everything to mother. But to Sri Ramakrishna, he used to suggest, pray for spiritual, this is the spiritual things to Sri Ramakrishna. Okay, so I'd like to take us to Calcutta on the 11th of March, 1885. And we're at the house of Balaram Bose, one of Sri Ramakrishna's very disciples. His home was like Sri Ramakrishna's second home. It was like he called it his Calcutta fort. He would come there and he would meet the devotees where they could meet him, because Dakshineshwar was quite some distance from Calcutta. So he would go there, and it's evening. He spent the whole day there, probably, and gradually night is falling. It's becoming dark. So I'll read now from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. The shadow of evening fell on Calcutta. For the moment, the noise of the busy metropolis was stilled. Gongs and conch shells proclaimed the evening worship in many Hindu homes. Devotees of God set aside their worldly duties and turned their minds to prayer and meditation. This joining of day and night, this mystic twilight, always created an ecstatic mood in the master. Because this is 1885, they didn't have electric lights yet. It was a different time. And you could hear through of course, it was a March, so it's going to be hot. So the windows would be open. You hear in the neighborhood, so many homes that they'd start ringing the bell and having the evening service, and as we do here, as we did here just this evening, in fact. So this atmosphere is a spiritual atmosphere is being created. The devotees seated in the room looked at Sri Ramakrishna as he began to chant the sweet name of the Divine Mother. So he starts chanting Divine Mother's name. For him, Divine Mother is his chosen ideal, his Ishta Devi. He's chanting Mother's name. And then he begins to pray. And M really rightly points out here, he observes very beautifully, what was the need of prayer to a soul in constant communion with God? A constant awareness of Divine Mother, seeing her everywhere in all things. Why does he need to pray? So M points out, did he not rather want to teach erring mortals how to pray? So this is of course, M's interpretation, but I think it's correct. This is Sri Ramakrishna teaching us how to pray. And this is his beautiful prayer to Divine Mother. Some of you may know it. It's worth committing to memory. O Mother, I throw myself on thy mercy. I take shelter at thy hallowed feet. I do not want bodily comforts. I do not crave name and fame. I do not seek the aid occult powers. Be gracious and grant that I have pure love for thee. A love unsmitten by desire, untainted by any selfish ends, a love craved by the devotee for the sake of love alone. And grant me the favor, O Mother, that I may not be deluded by thy world bewitching Maya, that I may never be attached to the world, to lust and gold, conjured up by thy inscrutable Maya. O Mother, there is no one but thee whom I may call my own. Mother, I do not know how to worship. I am without austerity. I have neither devotion nor knowledge. Be gracious, Mother, and out of thy infinite mercy, grant me love for thy lotus feet. Then M goes on to describe how they experienced this. He says, every word of this prayer, uttered from the depths of his soul, stirred the minds of the devotees. The melody of his voice and the childlike simplicity of his face touched their hearts very deeply. So let's unpack this prayer just a little bit. Let's look at the different aspects of it. This is one of his oft-repeated prayers. This is the kind of the fullest expression of it on that day, March 11, 1885. And but he would vary it a little, and he would direct it also to different aspects of the divine. Sometimes he would play to Rama, or sometimes to Krishna, or very often to Divine Mother. And so let's have a look. First, he chants the name a few times. He's coming into a spiritual mood. He's entering a bhava, a spiritual mood, where his mind is flowing towards God, and he's chanting God's name. And then this prayer, this expression of surrender, of taking utter refuge in the divine. So that's not exactly a prayer. He's expressing in this beautiful language, I throw myself on thy mercy. I take shelter at thy hallowed feet. It's a beautiful translation. It's not quite literal. Literally, in Bengali, he says, Ma. Ma is the word for mother in most languages. He says, Ma, Ami Tomar Sharanagata Sharanagata. Ma, I have fully taken refuge in you. I have dedicated myself fully at your feet. I throw myself utterly on your mercy. That's the sense of those words. Sharanagata. And so this is the first step, the stage of this prayer, expressing this utter dedication, recognizing we don't actually have any safe harbor in this world. Nothing here is eternal. Everything will crumble away except the divine. That is what, realizing that, we take refuge there. We take utter refuge in the divine. Then he's telling Mother, and telling his own mind, or when we recite these prayers, we're telling God, but we're also telling our own minds and driving those ideas deep within what we don't want. Okay, I don't need bodily comforts. I don't want that. I'm here for you. I don't want bodily comforts. I don't want name and fame. I don't want 8 occult powers. Occult powers, maybe in the West it's not quite so prevalent idea, but in India, the idea is that if you're spiritual, you should have some powers. And monks, especially monastics, oftentimes especially the more simple village people, they'll think, well, what, if you're a monk, you should have some powers, like foretelling the future, maybe telling me what the number is for the lottery, blessing me with it so that I'll find a good spouse, a good wife or husband, or have a good children, or that my business should prosper. We should have some powers, and it's deeply ingrained in the kind of the Hindu psyche, the Indian psyche, at least, of power. In fact, some of our monks get challenged. What kind of monks are you? You don't have any powers. Swami Satyamananda told, well, he was on a trade with some other monks, and the monks were like, "You Ramakrishna mission people, you don't have any powers. What is that?" And he had a beautiful answer. He said, "Yes, but we have the power of purity." And they liked that. Those monks, they said, "Oh, yeah, that's true. Power of purity." So this nice little. So we don't seek those either. They make study of Raja Yoga. We know they make them. We're not seeking occult powers. What are we praying for here? What is Sri Ramakrishna suggesting we pray for? For love, for devotion. Just for love, for love's sake alone. That intense love, how blessed we will be if we get that kind of sincere love for God, for Mother. And it's a love that doesn't have it's not diluted by any desire for anything else. It's just love for love's sake, just to love Mother. And here comes the one prayer for protection. Protect me from worldliness. May I not get drawn back into worldly life and forget you. May I not decide that, after all, I'm really interested in chasing the ephemeral dreams of this world. There is no one but you whom I may call my own. Then so again, this idea of taking refuge, where else can we find refuge? The divine is our only refuge. And then, this is interesting, he says, I don't know how to worship. I am without austerity. I have neither devotion nor knowledge. What does this mean? So can we think of anyone more austere than Ramakrishna? Can we think he was a pujari in the temple? He attained a heights of, I mean, it was a tremendous engine of his spiritual practice and realization was doing puja in the temple before a stone image of Mother Kali. And now he's saying, I don't know how to worship. What does he mean? Why does he say that? On the one hand, of course, he's teaching us how to pray. But I think it's more than that. It is that when we actually touch the divine, when we actually experience the divine, we realize that that infinite love is so tremendous. That infinitude of bliss is so overwhelming that nothing we could do could make us fit to receive that. And there's not. How can we worship that which is infinite love and shining in every heart and at the very ground of all existence? How could we worship that? I don't know how to worship. What austerity could we do that would discipline our minds enough that we could be fit to realize the divine? There's nothing. That's the mood that comes. Uh, so he comes again to this prayer because I don't have devotion. Yes, we have some devotion. All right, we're here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here if we didn't have some devotion. But actually, compared to the infinite love that is God, we have one tiny drop, the infinite ocean of love. Well, so I have to say, I don't have devotion. I don't know. I don't have knowledge. Be gracious, Mother, and out of thy infinite mercy, grant me love for thy lotus feet. It's a very powerful prayer. And these are the themes in Sri Ramakrishna's prayers and teachings, and guide for our own prayers. So I think we run a risk of shortchanging ourselves if we ignore prayer. I had one of my monastic brothers. Uh, I asked him once early on when we were both novices. I asked him, "So, what do you think about prayer? What do you pray? How do you pray?" And he said, "Oh, I just get that out of the way. I just do a quick prayer. I want to get it out of the way so I can get down to japa. He's a real japa person. He's repeating it. So he's not. And I was like, oh, well, but I think many of us may have that as okay, prayer. Okay, Guru says I have to pray. So before I do my japa, I pray. So I recite this prayer. Oh God, give me this. Whatever it is, and then run through because I got to get down to meditation. It's a big mistake. Actually, prayer prepares our minds for meditation. Meditation is not so easy as we sometimes think it is, and it helps a lot to prepare the ground, prepare our minds, stoke some longing. It's when we long for God that we can meditate. So it's a very important practice, I think, and it's a great remedy also for certain obstacles that we get: dullness, distraction, sleepiness. When we pray sincerely and with a heartfelt sincerity, the mind naturally gets focused. It's very hard to for most of us to completely still the mind, especially when we first sit down, to completely still the mind, forget about our jobs, forget about our families, forget about our bodies and the problems of our bodies, and focus on God. Very difficult. We get constantly go. But if we have a prayer that maybe we've memorized the prayer and we're reciting it slowly and deeply, and that focuses our mind on the divine and draws all our energy there. So see, now suddenly we're thinking of God. We're not meditating yet, but we're thinking of God, we're praying. And that can take us to a deeper meditation. So it's important. And also, I remind myself that if I'm trying to meditate, it's like I'm trying to lift myself Godward. But when I'm praying, I'm also invoking divine grace. I'm being lifted, as it were. I'm being lifted. So I look at the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna as a kind of also a book of prayers. There's so many songs in the Gospel, and they've been beautifully translated into English also. They're beautiful in, like, most of them are Sanskrit, Bengali. There's a couple of Sanskrit somethings, but they've also been beautifully translated as powerful prayers in English also. And poems are easy to memorize for many people. For me, at least, a poem is easier to memorize than a text. And we can keep some of those prayers when we find ourselves unable to meditate. Sometimes the best thing is to stop and say, okay, I'm not going to meditate right now. I'm going to pray. And rather take one of those prayers. They become like a friend. This prayer. And there's so many beautiful prayers. We won't get into prayers today, more than that probably, but like our evening prayers that we sang here, the meaning of them is tremendous compositions by Swami Vivekananda. Now, so a little danger of prayer also has the danger, just like when we say the japa, repeating the mantra, becomes mechanical. Prayer also can become mechanical, especially if we know it too well. Like the evening prayers that we sang today, I know them backwards and forwards. I can sing them without singing them. My lips can be singing them while I'm thinking about what's for supper. It may be surprising. I've sung them so many times. I've basically sung these songs every day for the last 20 or 30 years. So it becomes automatic. So I can play, and I can even play the harmonium and sing and be thinking about what's for dinner. And suddenly I'll come back to myself, and sometimes I'll think like, oh God, where am I? So this is a dangerous. And Aldous Huxley had a nice term for this. He's called it a kind of reverential insensibility, a stupor of the spirit, an inward deafness to the meaning of the sacred words. So this is something to guard against, even with prayer, because our minds, spiritual life is all about working with our minds and knowing the pitfalls of our minds. All right, let me share one more point about, say, taking a memorized prayer and how one can use it as a powerful tool to take us deeper. And that is taking a little help from Eknath Easwaran, who was a wonderful Vedanta teacher who came to America. He was a professor, university professor, and with his wife, he founded a organization called Blue Mountain or something. And he has a wonderful teaching on, he calls it passage meditation. By the by, when Eknath Easwaran came to the country on the ship, he had with him two books, the Bhagavad Gita and the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. He doesn't mention Ramakrishna much, but he was, Ramakrishna is an important influence for him. So, and there's one particular part of this practice that's important. In passage meditation, he suggests we memorize a prayer or a holy passage. Not too long at first, so we can memorize it. Like, say, the prayer that we just read of Sri Ramakrishna's prayer to Divine Mother. And we close our eyes and we repeat it to ourselves, but slowly, listening to every word, letting every word sink down into our hearts. So not too slow, but not too fast. So it might be, and we would find our own rhythm for that. I throw myself on thy mercy. I take shelter at thy hallowed feet. Now, here's the important rule that we set for our minds when doing this practice. If I get distracted, start over. It's simple. If I get distracted, start over. There's a big difference. If we don't have this rule, And we started doing, and then we get distracted, and you're like, hey, I'm supposed to pray. Yeah, I'm praying, but I just got to think. I'm just going to think about this for a little bit, and you're off, and you've gone halfway around the world, and then 10 minutes later, like, oh wait, where was I? So start over. Then the mind learns, oh, if I'm going to get through this prayer, I have to stick with it. I can't go to other things. And from my own experience, I know at the beginning when first doing this, it's very hard to get through the passage. It's very hard. Distracted. But the mind learns. We can train our minds. So that's why, and that's what I love about this teaching, this rule. You set this rule for yourself. Start over when you get distracted. And then sometimes you can get through the whole prayer. You can get through the whole passage, and you can do it again. And gradually, we can let that prayer ripen into meditation. Let it be a call. One of my favorite prayers from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, it's also a beautiful song, is Thou art my all in all, O Lord, the life of my life, the essence of essence. In the three worlds, I have none else but thee to call my own. So it goes on for a few verses. But then as we deepen, maybe we don't have to recite the whole thing. Maybe that first line is enough. Thou art my all in all. And then if it takes us a little deeper still, it can just be Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, 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 Lord. See how it can deepen into meditation as we cultivate that mood of the prayer, and that mood starts to awaken our hearts. And so that's probably enough for tonight about longing and prayer. And I believe the idea is that we can have some time for questions or comments. So feel free. Anyone have a question or a comment? Otherwise, I'll share another prayer or two, a favorite prayer or two of mine.
Would you mind to elaborate about the Saranagati?
Sharanagati. Well, what's to say about Sharanagati? That means this practice of taking utter refuge in the divine. Something that strikes me about the Sharanagati, this idea of taking refuge. You've probably seen people, and maybe some of you do this also, when they bow down in the shrine and they make a Shashtanga Pranam. That means all your limbs are touching. So they lie down on the ground like a stick, with the hands in front. So I don't know if you've seen that here or you've done it yourself. And that's a beautiful outward expression of that attitude trying to take in Sharanagati, in utter surrender, that recognizing that we have no shelter in this world. See, where is our security in this world? Well, we have our what is it called? IRA, right? Individual retirement account, and that's our security. But what happens when the stock market crashes? That happened a few years ago, and I know people who, they were planning to retire next year, and suddenly they can't retire because there's not enough money in the IRA anymore. So that's not secure. House is good, but here in Texas we get tornadoes. Sometimes a house is completely destroyed by a tornado. Okay, house is not a safe shelter. Every of the house, the man's castle or whatever it is, a palace. Uh, the earth, California we have earthquakes. Texas you have hurricanes and tornadoes. I don't know. They're both pretty serious things, and so that's not secure. What is secure? Well, I have my family, I have my kids, I have my spouse, but we know that even that is not. We can't count on even if we have kids, and even if they're good kids, we can't count 100% that they'll always be there for me. When I get old, they'll take care of me. We can't count on. What can we count on? Nothing. Where is there security in this world? It's very, very, very difficult. So that reflecting on that, that's why I'm talking. I mean, it's kind of sobering, no? But it's to reflect in that way, and feeling that, well, then actually there's no place for me to go but to the divine. And this practice of pranam, uh, you know, some people may feel that's just an external formality. It's not important. It's the inner mood which is important. But our bodies and minds are intimately connected. So certain physical practices actually are helpful in spiritual life. And one of them, I believe, is the practice of making pranam at an altar. We do it every single day. With monastics, we bow down at the altar every single day. At Belur Mutt, you'll see at the temple, every day all the monks come in and they all lie down in front of Ramakrishna. They just taking complete refuge. And the idea is that all our Shashtanga means with all 8 limbs. What are the 8 limbs? Well, there's different ways of counting it. There's your legs and your chest and your hands and your head. But then they also say sometimes you include your mind and your speech also in that pranam. So you're laying everything at the Lord's feet. And by doing that, I had a mentor before I joined the monastery who told me, if you make pranam regularly, even if you don't have devotion, in spite of yourself, you'll start to get some. So even a simple practice like making pranam is helpful for that cultivating that sharanagati, that seeking refuge. And to pray like this, that prayer that Sri Ramakrishna said is such a beautiful prayer. Here.
All right, thank you so much for the talk. I just wanted to reconcile on in the early part of the talk, talk about reminding yourselves of death, trying to strengthen your practices, but also listening to a lot about like there's always talk about transcending it and not making that something that you would focus on. So how do we reconcile those maybe? And is it contextual that you use those?
Well, I guess they go hand in hand. On the one hand, when we remember death, then also we remember, yes, but I will not die. So I think they go hand in hand. But to remind ourselves that what we most of the time think ourselves to be is going to die. Because most of the time, still, all of us, I think, maybe almost all of us, most of the time, we still think of ourselves as this. How are you doing? Doing great. Or how are you doing? Well, I'm a little under the weather today. What are we talking about? The body. I'm hungry. Body. I'm cold. Body. Oh, it's so hot here in Texas. Body. It's so much a part of our experience because that's what sense all experience in this world is mediated through our bodies. All our senses, everything that we see, everything we taste and hear and smell and touch, it's all through the body. So naturally, we become identified with it. It becomes a part of who we are. And Vedanta says, well, yes, but actually, that's not who you are. Go deeper, go further. So remembering that this is going to die, on hand, it's a yes, but there is that divine immortal soul, which is who I am. And also reminds us, it reminds us not to put everything, don't put all our eggs in one basket. This is going to end. This one is going to end. So let me find that which doesn't end. That's the idea. And Sri Ramakrishna does say one should constantly remember death. Not in a morbid way, but in the way that it spurs us on to practice sharanagati, that it spurs us on to take refuge in God and remember God more.
Swamiji, you have clearly stated that the intense yearning is a necessary condition for realizing God. Thank you for the gem. Can it also be a sufficient condition? Is the object of intense yearning the same in all the four paths? This question is online from Eden.
So necessary and sufficient. It seems that Sri Ramakrishna says, he says when the rosy dawn, when the sun, the sky becomes rosy in the morning, you know that the sun is soon going to rise. Similarly, when you see intense yearning in somebody, then you know that the vision of God is not far to seek. And well, every person's spiritual life is unique. Every path is unique. So that yearning may take different forms according to our own unique individual approach to the divine. So that, as far as the yoga part of the question. Yes. And you also had a question, and then we can. One more. Last question. Okay. Because we have to eat. Body.
Meaning, because should we just like occasionally, like I don't know what sadhanas to do to maybe stay, because a lot of the time I like to do reading and also because we meditate, so it's mostly japa along with meditation. So what can we do? So,
Well, yes, that's a great blessing. You have tasted. There have been times when you've tasted that, and the true. Our life, our minds are like that. It goes up and down. I think pretty much what we've been talking about. Recognizing this. First of all, recognizing how special it is, and trying to preserve it. Noticing what brings it on, what brings on that yearning. Maybe it's a particular passage in a book that made you suddenly feel so. Maybe we return to that passage, memorize that passage, remember how we felt that time when we felt that yearning, and fanning that little flame. For some people, it might be a song that awakens that yearning. Of course, you hear the song again, and then it doesn't do it again. I had a friend who this is before I joined the monastery. She was ecstatic because she was listening to a gospel song in the upper room with Jesus. And she was telling us that we had a little group of seekers, and she said, suddenly I was in the upper room with Jesus, and it was so beautiful. And so she had some kind of spiritual experience from the song. And so she listened to the song all day and played it again and again and again. It was beautiful, but obviously it doesn't necessarily last. Actually, Swami Swahanandi told me, if you can maintain that intense longing, if you can maintain it, you will get a spiritual experience. You'll have spiritual experience. So, but we talked a little bit about what dissipates it. One is we keep it secret so that it does, and two is maybe we when we feel that kind of longing, we don't open our social media, don't look at the news. Preserve it, protect it, because social media is actually anti-social media. It will distract us, and yeah. So thank you very much. Shall I close with a prayer, or? Om asato ma sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityormamritangamaya aviravirma edhi rudrayati dakshinam mukham tena mam pahi nityam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Reach us through and to ourselves, and ever protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Om, peace, peace, peace.